Well, it's a new year and it's gotten a little stale with just the two of us, so we brought in a third to make things awesome again.
Taylor, your sex tape.
That's right. It is TV, guys. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Paul.
And Paul, you are the one that makes it awesome.
Paul is also now officially our first three-time guest.
3-time. How does it feel, Paul?
Well, I pretty much appear on most episodes, just usually by honorable mention. So,
yeah, he's actually in the background of our videos here, but since this is an audio podcast, no one can see him.
Yep, so. Pretty much.
Well, we are talking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine. We have talked about this show a lot, and we just haven't had a full episode dedicated to it, right, Brian?
No, we haven't. And so when I started to rewatch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I told Matt, I said, I'm rewatching this, and when I finish, we have to do an episode on it. And then I invited both Paul and his wife, my sister Laura, on, but she decided, hey, I don't want to do this because she's lame like that. So we could have had 2 guests. We have 1 guest on for Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
There you go.
Yeah, we actually, Laura and I had watched this show while it was, airing on the early days and enjoyed the show, but just without the benefit of streaming platforms and being able to binge watch, we had missed episodes, and every episode kind of stands on its own in a way. So we had seen a chunk of them, but we just went back and rewatched the entire series and just wrapped it up a couple of weeks ago, actually. So this is good timing.
Yeah. I think it's a good mix of both episodic and serialized, because there are some storylines that go through. There's maybe sometimes a string of 3 or 4 episodes that all are one story. But for the most part, it's your basic, they solve a crime. By the end of the episode, they have the crime solved kind of show.
And I mean, that was cop shows. Most cop shows that you watch, they're that type of show. And it's only in recent years that they've gotten more serialized than episodic. But this is a show that we talked about Jump the Shark ones. And I felt so this show started on Fox for 5 years. It was on Fox for 5 seasons, and then they canceled it for some reason. And then it went over to NBC, and I felt like it went downhill. Quality went downhill once it went to NBC. I don't know if you guys feel that way.
A little bit, but it wasn't as drastic a change. It's not like going from Michael Scott to Robert California. It was it was a lower dip in quality, but there was still a dip.
I was going to say, for me, the real drop-off happened the very last season. Up until then, I felt like it was still strong. I still really enjoyed it. The last season, not so great.
They kind of felt like they had to apologize that they're a cop show, and that worked its way into its script. And I felt like, you know what, you've done a good job of doing the serious side of it too. Cause they had a couple episodes like that.
Sure.
I really liked the one where they had Rosa, that she responded to a shooting or something like that, and they couldn't get through to her. So it's pretty much all of them at the 9-9 just waiting to hear if Rosa died or not. That sort of thing. And that they couldn't do anything. They're powerless. I thought that was a great episode that showed a very real side of police work, and they tackled racism, they tackled sexual abuse, stuff like that, and they did a really good job up until the final season, where it's
one thing there's the whole running gag of Hitchcock only being on Zoom until the very end. I'm wondering if the actor had some kind of COVID or something until the very end, or were they just saving it for that reveal at the end with the heist?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the biggest thing is it was hard for me to swallow the idea that suddenly, overnight between the second to last and last season, suddenly these cops are no longer proud of being cops anymore, and something drastically just shifted there. And I just didn't think that was a realistic, picture. That they'd still take pride in their profession and their work. They've invested so much of their careers into that.
Yeah, and they had a prime opportunity too, because it is a time where there is a lot of upset ideas about police officers, and should the whole establishment of should police even be what it is, and should that change. And they had a really good opportunity to show a side of policing, and I think they tried to, but I didn't feel like they tackled it well enough. And so if they were going to tackle it the way they did, maybe they should have just left it alone, in my opinion. So, but the first season, I I was saying I just rewatched the whole first season and a little bit of the second season. And they had a really great dynamic early on. And that's what we're talking about is we're talking about relationships. But they had, like, right away from the get-go, they had the relationships pretty well figured out. And they had a couple bumps in the road, but the bumps in the road they handled in a really good way where they gave natural character progression. Like, for instance, Holt in the first season is a lot more of a stickler. He's always been a stickler. He always is a stickler throughout the whole seasons. Mm-hmm. But in the first season, he's a lot more, like, harsh on it and almost to a fault. And they change him and they loosen him up, but that's not like they're taking back their character or whatever. They're having him be influenced by the 9-9, and it makes complete sense of an actual character growing and being like, okay, I can trust these guys a little more, and I don't have to be the overbearing that I was.
I also think they amp up Holt's like neuroticism and like control freak things whenever they need it for a story.
Oh yeah,
well,
that's any sitcom.
He becomes more of a vulnerable character. Like, he kind of shows his quirkiness, and you get to know a little bit more about him rather than just being the serious all business captain that he was in the first season.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He's the fun one between him and Kevin. Speaking of the first season, so I have traced back from watching from the get-go. I have traced back the first episode that introduced the title of your sex tape. Do you know which episode that was?
Wasn't it in the pilot or really early?
It was really early. It was the first Halloween episode.
Oh, it was the first heist?
Yeah, the first Halloween episode gave us title of your sex tape and the heist running gag. Those two things, like, that was the most important episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It gave us these giant things, so...
That's awesome. So this is a little bit related. I've been listening to the Parks and Rec podcast, Parks and Recollection, which actually has Rob Lowe as a host, and they're talking about all like some of their favorite TV writers, and they talk about writers named Mike Scully and Norm Hiscock. It's like it seems very clear that Scully and Hitchcock were named after these writers.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've always recognized Norm Hiscock, but that's because I'm a child, and so I see the executive producer and I just giggle to myself every time because I'm so immature. But yeah, you're probably right. So we are talking about pairings, though. We are talking about some great relationships. We all have kind of picked a couple different pairings that fall into different categories. We've got about 6 categories here, and we're going to give that category, and we're going to say which 2 characters we feel best exemplify that. So jumping off of Halloween, the first one we're jumping into right away is which 2 characters do you think are the best for pulling off the Halloween heist? Which 2 would you pick to win it all? So, Brian, why don't we start with you?
So it's interesting. There's different ways you can go with this. You can think like which pair would you want to do a heist with, or which ones do you think would be the best at doing a heist? Honestly, I didn't go for Captain Holt or Jake because even though they're the 2 big heist guys, they're the ones who take it the most serious, because I don't think either of them could truly work in a pair because both of them want that credit to themselves. So I'm thinking who could actually work together as a pair? I'm going to go with Terry and Charles.
That is a really to me.
That is surprising.
Well, because here's the thing: like Terry would be the brains, but like Charles is a good second in command because Charles is not going to be the one who's going to screw you over and try to take credit for himself. He would actually work with Terry because I feel like they could have that trust that I don't think anybody else would have. Like I feel like even like Rosa and Amy would want to like get the credit for themselves. So I think, and Terry proved when he won his heist that he has the skill for it. And I feel like he would be just humble enough to be able to like not be bragging about it and give away his plan, and he could use Charles to his advantage.
Okay.
I think Terry only won because the one heist that he won because everybody else was so caught off guard that he was actually in the heist. I don't see him as being clever enough to pull it off when everybody is watching him.
I don't
Maybe.
mind your Boyle reasoning because I agree that he is a great secondary, that he's very helpful and he's full of surprises. I think if Boyle is going to get partnered with someone, though, that it needs to be someone like Jake or like Holt, like someone who really wants to win the heist. You need someone who is so competitive that is fighting to win that. And Terry every year is like, I don't know, or I don't want to be a part of it or whatever. He's not like the leader of that part to be like, I'm going to go after this. So I don't specifically agree with that pairing.
That's fair. I just couldn't put either Jake or Holt in a pair because like they're not going to work as
Agreed.
a pair.
Well, they were unsuccessful as a pair.
Yeah,
they were paired up once and they lost.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Paul? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying the last thing. Keep in mind that Amy won the heist with Hitchcock and Scully.
Yeah. So my pairing is I did pick Holt as kind of the primary team lead because I think he is probably the smartest person in the 9-9. But I actually paired him with Gina Linetti.
Oh my gosh!
And and the reason I did that is I think that Gina actually has the best understanding of what's going on. So if people were trying to plan ahead and prep and pull stuff off in advance, Gina would know about it before anyone else did. And I think she's just always in everybody else's business. So I think between Holt's brains and Gina's kind of awareness of what's going on, I think they're pretty unstoppable.
I think she's a good pairing because Gina has proven like she doesn't try to make herself seem dumb, but she's definitely like like overlooked. She's definitely the one that people don't look at enough because when she won the heist, she was able to prove that she can do it.
Yeah, I think that I think that's where the problem would be of like, who would be the head on the Holt and Gina team, because Gina
she might undermine him.
Yeah, she would either undermine. She's like, it has to be about her. It always has to be about her, and because of that, I could see there being that issue of Holt like, oh, this is my plan. And Gina's like, well, I'm going to do it the way I want to, because that's her. She always does it however she wants to, and even if Holt has a genius plan, she could easily backfire on that.
That's true.
But I think a Gina Boyle, like this wasn't my pick, but after you guys both went, I think a Gina Boyle pairing for this would actually be surprisingly good, because Gina would be that one of like, I want to win it, and Boyle would be like, yeah, I'll go along with it. That might even be better than my pick, because my pick was Jake and Rosa, because I think Jake is very clever. I think he's awesome. He's shown a great aptitude. And Rosa does really well in how she worked with Jake. They both have a good history together. And there's some episodes early on where you could see how Jake, like, he had this one episode with the Pontiac Bandit where Jake and Rosa had like this 1,000 push-ups bet that, if they say 1,000 push-ups, that means the other person is going to go along with them because they're that sure about it that they are betting 1,000 push-ups on it. And so they have this history where they can give and take, but they're both very driven. They're both very capable and both very smart. So I think I would still put my money on that, even though it would be a fun Gina Boyle pairing to see take the whole thing.
I can't blame that. Jake and Rosa are a very good pair at the show. That we wouldn't think, like a lot of shows would have that, like, okay, if Jake being like main character, he's got his best friend in Boyle and his love interest in Amy, and kind of diagonally across is Rosa. A lot of shows wouldn't bother to have Jake and Rosa have any kind of really dynamic. They could just have them overlooked. But Brooklyn Nine-Nine made a really good pass at making every connection have strength in it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with that pairing. Yeah. I'm not going to argue with that pairing because, well, it might come up a little bit later. So
yeah.
I know. I almost had it for the other one. I'm like, wait, I can't have it for both. So. All right. So the next pairing that we've got is, which two would you like to hang out with? So it's going to be a threesome, you and these two people hanging out, and who would be the two that you'd pick to be friends with you? So Brian, you went first last time. Let's go with Paul. Who would be your two you want to hang out with?
Okay, so I basically did this based on the process of elimination, just by personalities.
Yeah,
and I ended up with Jeffers and Peralta, because I think I would have fun with those guys. I don't have much in common with Diaz. Amy would be a little bit too uptight, wouldn't be much fun. Holt is a little bit too pretentious, and Charles is a little too creepy. So, by default, I think Jake and Terry would be the ones I'd want to hang out with.
Yeah, I consider that too. That's actually close to mine. I had Terry as well, but this is where I kind of throw a curveball. I went with Terry and Scully.
That is a weird curveball.
Okay.
Because think about it. Okay, Hitchcock and Scully. Like Scully's definitely the more likable. He doesn't have any of the creepiness of Hitchcock. He's just incompetent. We were just hanging out. Like, couldn't you see just going to like get a bunch of food at a restaurant and hang out with
a vending machine?
Yeah, or anywhere, like, or you go to Wing Sluts. I just think he'd be a really chill hang, especially if he's without Hitchcock.
I like the one episode where I can't remember what their version of the games are that they have, but they have like all these things that they do to kill time while they're waiting.
The Jimmy Jab games.
That's yes.
Yeah.
And so one of them is like eating old food out of the fridge, and like it's all disgusting. And then it's like, no one's gonna beat Scully in this one. He looks down the table and everyone's like, you know this is free, right? And he just keeps eating this disgusting food from the fridge. I love Scully, but I don't want to be around him.
No, he's disgusting.
Well, I'll give you one more example. Over in the last season when they went to the cabin to try to fix up Holt and Kevin together, everyone's got their own drama going on, and then Rosa got high and was just testing potato chips with Scully the whole time. Wouldn't you rather be in that room?
True. That is a fair point. I also went with Terry. Terry is such a good, like, likable person. He is so non-dramatic, and I think that's what drew all of us to have him on our list, because we don't want crazy. I actually like Amy, too. I think that I would have enough in common with Amy, where I feel like Terry, Amy, and we could play like a board game. Like, I don't feel like any of the other pairings we would do something like that. I'm not a very like crazy sort of social type person, but I enjoy like the company of others, and so I think an Amy and Terry and me, we would be low key and would have enough, especially now that Amy's a mom and Terry's a dad, obviously, and so we would have those to talk about our kids and that sort of stuff. I think I'd get along really well with a Terry Amy pairing.
Although I don't think either Terry or Amy would pull off a long-term prank on their kids like you are.
It's a short-lived prank. It was a couple days. So just to give context, because I don't know how many of you guys know this. So I with my oldest son Elijah, we were taking a picture with the 4 kids in front of the tree, and we got a picture, and then he's like, okay, I'm done. And he goes outside, and it was like we couldn't get him back in. And so we took another picture because the first one wasn't as good. So we took another picture with the 3 kids, and then we showed him that picture, and it was like, Elijah, the picture you took, you're not in that picture anymore. He's like, what? It's like, you're not showing up on. So I would take a picture of a background and be like, oh, Elijah, come here and stand in front of me, and then take a picture with him in front of the background. Well, I wouldn't actually take the picture, but then I'd show him the background picture and be like, you're not in this one. So I kept telling him that he wouldn't show up. So then he started writing a book about his experiences.
Is this a Back to the Future prank?
I don't know what it is. He's written 2 chapters of I can't remember what Strange Disappearances, I think is what he called the book. So he's written 2 chapters of this kid who suddenly can't be found on camera anywhere.
Yeah, I thought Back to the Future as well.
Yeah, isn't that the bit? He fades out of the picture and
well, his older brother starts to fade out of the pictures the more he starts to stop his parents from getting together.
Exactly. And Angie asked him if he's a time traveler and if he has stopped us from getting together since he's disappearing from pictures. Except I don't think he got the reference.
Also, it would make more sense if you went back to before you and Angie even like met or were dating. You guys are still married, so like.
That's true. All right. So the next pairing here is the funniest pairing. I have a 2, so I'm going to go with my like outside of the box one. I really love the jib and jabbing. That's not a term. I love the banter between Holt and Wunsch. I love this whole like dynamic of like Holt's best lines all have to do with like when Madeline Wunsch comes in and he talks about, it's like your head's so close to the ground, pity it's not been run over by a truck, stuff like that. I love all of those lines that he gives. It's a little one-sided, so that's why it was like my backup pick there, but I definitely wanted to bring it up. I love those.
That is way outside the box.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't even considering Wunsch for anything.
I wasn't either, but I laugh so hard every time that those two are together. He's so petty and bitter about her, and it's great.
It's like she says one weakness, and he knows it. He still can't stop it.
Yeah. Wunsch rhymes with lunch. This opens up so many new possibilities.
Like, yeah, we all knew that. We all figured that out the second we heard the name.
You're going to be Wunsch meat. Is that the one you want to go with? Yes. All right.
I went with Jake and Gina. I think they have similar energies, and it's shown both in real life and in the show, like they're childhood friends, and so they have that history together. And a lot of times with Jake, when he's paired with almost anyone else, they're gonna like try to rein him in and be like, okay, that's too much. Whereas Gina's like, yeah, keep going. Like she's gonna always yes and him, and like, but she also can control him subtly without him realizing it. So it's like she can control the situation while still adding in her humor.
I hate Gina. I'm sorry. I hate her so much. She's made, it's like she has funny lines, sure. That character. This is the only one that actually annoys me, and I felt the show was better once she left.
No, I disagree. I disagree.
In all of our conversations about characters, you guys have noticed that I do not like divas. I am like an anti-diva sort of guy.
Yeah. I feel like you feel the same way about Gina as you do about Miss Piggy.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And the same way as Donna from Parks and Rec. I don't hate Donna as much, but I definitely do not like her.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, for mine, I went with the classic combination for this one, Peralta and Boyle. And I mean, I laugh out loud every time these guys are paired together. Like just the way that like Charles will say something and Jake will be like, "Yeah, okay, that's creepy." I mean, just that recognition that like Charles is really weird, but yet they still have this great friendship, this great relationship. And they actually work really well together and are effective as detectives together. So I just think they're hilarious every time they're paired up together. And I think the writing staff thought that too, because they are in so many episodes where they're paired up together. Yeah. So I think you can't lose with that.
I love the one where they're on a stakeout, and first they're like, yeah, we'll never get sick of each other. They ended up like filling the wall.
That was a great episode.
With rules. And Charles, in other shows, could do a thing where like Charles is super into Jake, but Jake's kind of like whatever, like the friendship's one-sided. And even though you said Jake can point out when he's creepy, like it actually is a two-way street in the friendship. Like Jake's not just placating Charles, he actually is friends with him, which I think is a nice dynamic too.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly. It's really refreshing because this is a route you don't see them go often. And the route that you talked about is the common one of like, oh, geez, Boyle. Like Boyle being the laughing stock. Boyle easily could be the laughing stock of the show, and sometimes he is. But there is a lot of Jake showing respect to Boyle and honoring him and being friendly with him. And that was actually the one that I had wrote too, Paul. You and me, we're on the same page. So I wrote that one first, and then I thought of Holton and Wunsch, and I couldn't resist it. But yeah, great pick. I love these two. They're so good. All right. Most competent team. So these are the best. Like they can handle anything, especially when it comes to their job. So Brian, we started with you 3 picks ago, so we're going to go back to you.
This is the one that I think we might have some overlap. I wouldn't be surprised if one of you guys have my same one. I went with Jake and Rosa.
It's a great pick
because Jake and Rosa are shown to be two of the best detectives. Like I think they're better detectives than Amy or Charles. And a lot of times, like the bigger storylines revolve around Jake and Rosa. Like it's a pairing they keep going back to. Like when they both were the ones who wanted to join this team, and then they ended up getting sent to prison for it because it turns out their team leader was the dirty cop. Like, and it's just Rosa's so like she's so like mean and like doesn't care about anything, but she still does her job really well, and she'll work with people to get the job done. And like I said, I love the scene where they're inspecting Adrian Pimento, and when he first shows up and they're not sure what's going on, and Rosa's watching him do like the Tai Chi in the window. And all of a sudden Adrian shows up and is like, "You thought that guy was me? That guy has a total pancake butt." And then later on, Rosa on the radio, she's like, "Oh my God, this guy's a pancake butt. Jake, get out of there."
Yeah, I actually picked the same duo there, and I mean just the only thing I'll add to that is like I think Rosa is probably the best cop as it comes to like when there needs to be an arrest made or if there's a dangerous situation, like she's the one you want, you know. And Jake, well, he's a complete doofus and generally dumb, you know, in just about every area of life. Being a detective, he's clearly the best detective on the squad. So I think he has to be in there because I think he's the best detective, and I think Rosa's the most natural pairing. She'll follow his lead as it comes to like, you know, being the detective, but she'll pull her weight when it comes to for it to be time to make the arrest, that type of thing.
Yeah, I almost went with this pairing myself as well. And then instead it was the heist one I went with for them. And so I kind of changed it a little bit. It's still pretty close, but I picked Amy and Rosa because Amy is very similar to Jake in terms of quality, like quality for detective. Because they had in the first season, they had that bet of who has going to have the most felonies, and it was like neck and neck to the final day. And then Jake had this big sting and got like 10 at the last second. And so, you know, Amy is very competent as well. She's very smart. She's very driven, but she also has a side that Jake and Rosa don't have, where she is also that type A personality of everything being so organized that you're not going to miss anything that goes afterwards. And so we don't see a whole lot of this side of it, but a big part of the police work is all of the evidence being filed correctly, and so that the actual case is as solid as it can be. And I'm sure Jake and Rosa are good at that, but Amy, I can guarantee, is going to be better because of just that attention to detail that she has to have. And so I think that I could make that argument of her being just a little bit better, but I don't have a problem with the Jake and Rosa pairing either.
Yeah. So just like how Terry was on all of our lists for hanging out, Rosa's on our list. So I think we all agree that Rosa might be one of the most competent ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of naturally, your pick leads me into the next category, which is the least competent team. And I actually put Santiago on that.
Oh, no.
Now here's my logic. I'm not saying that Amy is incompetent as a police officer, but I think she's more of a suit than a detective. Like you said, I mean, the administrative side of things, like she is excellent at that. But if I were actually bringing somebody in to solve the crime, now I know there was a runner where like Jake and Amy were having a battle over who could close the most cases early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that shows that obviously she is a good detective. But that wasn't really proven out on the show. Like the one figuring out, solving the crimes, making the arrests, that was rarely Amy. And so I actually paired her for least competent team with Terry. And I think Terry is absolutely competent at his job. But again, his job really isn't being the detective necessarily. We show that like he's not necessarily the most intelligent guy. He like struggled to pass the lieutenant's exam a couple times. Where he's really good. He's a mentor, and he builds relationships in the squad, and he really makes that team work. But I don't know that he's necessarily one of the top detectives. So I think if you paired those two together, I don't know that even though they're great characters, I don't know that they'd necessarily be a great team for solving crime.
I think we have to have the caveat: this is least competent outside of Hitchcock and Scully.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I did include it. I don't have Hitchcock and Scully as the least competent, even though that's probably accurate of really would be the least. I actually put Hitchcock and Boyle because I think that Boyle's a good detective, but if he was the lead, he is not a good enough lead to rein in Hitchcock. And if Hitchcock was a lead, Hitchcock is not a good enough anything to help a Boyle do whatever he needs to do. So even though Hitchcock and Scully would be bad, I think Hitchcock and Boyle would be worse because I think Boyle would actually be trying. Like if Hitchcock and Scully come into a police scene and you like spend 5 minutes with both of these guys, you're like, nothing's getting solved. This is going to be terrible. But if Boyle is in there, you're like, okay, well, this guy at least knows a little bit of what he's doing. And like he knows enough that Hitchcock would really mess up in like further than what just Hitchcock and Scully can do themselves.
So it's been a while since I've seen it, but didn't they have like a flashback episode with Hitchcock and Scully where they were actually really good detectives at one point?
Yep.
Yes.
So that was my reasoning. Well, I didn't put Hitchcock and Scully in any of my pairings because I think they're kind of secondary cast.
Yeah.
But that would be my reason against pairing those two because obviously they're set up as the incompetent duo, but
they rarely get their own storyline.
Yeah.
Although there was one more where it was Boyle working with Hitchcock and Scully on a case, and at the beginning it was like, this guy's name is showing up a lot. Yeah, because he's the victim. And like, but I didn't like about that one is that when they showed Charles left and they came back, Hitchcock and Scully like, yeah, we did this, and we solved the crime. And he was like, what? You guys are actually good at your jobs? And they're like, don't tell anybody we're good at our jobs because we like to just sit at home, at our desks and do nothing. And I thought that reveal wasn't earned. Because I mean, every other time we see them, like, yeah, they're doing paperwork, but they're clearly incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. So I didn't like that reveal of that episode. I didn't think they put the work in for that one.
Maybe that's why they tried to fix it with the flashback episode. Maybe. Be like, hey, look, see, they were. We promise. It's just the wings. The wings got them.
So my pick for least competent, it's interesting because it's actually two very competent people individually. And Matt, I'm sorry, I have Amy on my list as well. That just
threw his arms up. Game buddy, Matt.
I know. That's my best friend.
I'm gonna go Amy and Holt because they're too similar, and I feel like they need to have someone like Jake or Rosa or even Terry to like kind of like bounce off them. Like they'll think of it from a different perspective. Whereas Amy and Holt are both very much like everything is the correct way to do things. There's like one way to do everything, and we kind of see that when they are trying to impress that. I forget, like a research journalist guy, and they end up putting that plaster on Boyle's head without like the protective thing, and they get him stuck in that plaster. You remember that?
I don't, but it sounds vaguely familiar.
Like there's this like really prestigious guy, and Amy and Holt are both like fanboying over him, and they have to put this plaster over somebody's head, and then their subject was Boyle, and they had to like put some like a protective seal or something on there. They ended up getting him completely stuck in there where they couldn't get it on there, so he's basically walking around unable to see because they couldn't get this thing off his head, and he like ended up like wandering down the stairs and stuff because they were both so focused that they missed the obvious thing.
I almost picked that same duo, and my reasoning was that Amy is too much of a fangirl of Holt, and she would just defer to him in everything. There wouldn't be any sort of it wouldn't be two heads working together. It would just be yes, whatever you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially which season Amy, because if it was the first couple seasons, that is her whole character, is that anytime she's around Holt, she becomes inept because she is so overthinking. How can I do what he wants me to do or say what he wants me to say or whatever? And it's only in later seasons that she begins to be more comfortable in her own skin around him and doesn't like seek his approval in the same way. All right. Well, we can't say that all three of us had Amy on our list because one of us went to bat for her. She's competent. All right. But we do have awkward pairings. And I have two, but I imagine one of you has one of them that I had thought of. So I'm going to go with this one. And if neither of you say the one I thought of, I'll bring it up because it needs to be brought up. But I went with Gina and Hitchcock. I feel like those two together are just... Gina is such a specific character that like she doesn't really work super well with characters. It's always like she just she's a vacuum in the room. She just sucks the air all to herself and doesn't always allow for anyone else to flourish. But there are just strong characters that there can be some back and forth between them. Hitchcock isn't a strong character. It's just going to be weird between these two together of having any sort of conversation. They're so polar opposite. And there's no reason for these two to be together. That would just be awkward to me.
I think anyone in Hitchcock could be a good pairing for that.
True.
But yeah, especially Gina.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian, who you got?
I went with Charles and Holt. I feel like out of all the pairings, I think that's one of the weakest ones. I feel like they don't really have anything in common. And I feel like it'd be kind of awkward for them two to ever work side by side. I can't really think of too many storylines that revolve around those two. Because, I mean, they can both work with Jake, they can both work with Rosa, they can both work with Gina. But I don't know, they just, with Holt being so no nonsense, like Holt does not have any time for the Boyle family nonsense.
Yes.
Agreed. That's a good pick. Okay, so I actually debated between two pairings, and both of them involve Boyle. The first one that I thought about and I didn't end up going with was Diaz and Boyle. And they had that runner where Boyle was super into Rosa and kept asking her out. And I'm so glad that they just had her like continually reject him, that they never went down that road actually, because I think it's a terrible fit. And so that never really worked out. But actually the one that I decided on was actually Santiago and Boyle.
I almost picked that too. Yeah.
And the reason being, the only thing that they really have in common is that they are really both into Jake. So, I mean, they were just, I don't know. I just can't even picture them being together. In fact, I was like thinking back on the show, and I really can't think of any scenes like even where they're together and Jake isn't in the scene. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overlooking it, but I just think they would not work well together.
There probably is a scene at some point, but I can't think of it off the top of my head either. And I was going to say the same thing for the same reason. Like they said, they don't intersect. They need the Jake as like the pairing.
Which that being introduced is actually pretty funny. I like that whole idea. It's similar to like on Scrubs with the JD Turk and Carla. Like JD and Carla, they have a fine enough relationship, but they both are fangirls over Turk. Well, I guess Carla is not a fangirl. She's a very strong, independent woman, but you know, the fact that Turk loves JD more than Carla sometimes, that's a good running gag that they have. Yeah. But yeah, my secondary pick was the same with you, Paul, it was Rosa and Boyle. And that was why I wanted to bring it up, is because I felt like we needed to at least mention it, because it was a mistake. Right? It was one of the few mistakes that they made in that first season, and they rectified it immediately. And again, it was natural. It was like a normal, like, okay, this is just how like crush like that would go. You would like them for a little bit of time, then it would be awkward for a little bit after that, once you're like, okay, this isn't happening, and then eventually it would go away.
Yeah. And
then I was going to say, and then they ended up having Gina and Boyle end up together for a little bit, and that was hilarious. Like that was such a great runner on the show.
Well, it kind of shows they knew it worked, because with Rosa and Boyle, that whole storyline at the beginning, they pulled a full Mark Brendanawicz and just decided we're not going to mention this ever again. And then, whereas like Gina and Charles, like seasons after they were no longer a thing, Charles would always mention like, yes, we're sibling lovers. Like they keep having to like bring up
the fact that their parents got together. I mean, that whole thing is just, it was honestly one of the best things in the entire series.
Yeah. And it makes sense that they didn't bring it up afterwards, because again, it was unrequited love. You know, Rosa had no interest at all in Boyle at all. And so of course that she's not going to view it as much as like, oh, this guy liked me for a little bit. What's worth talking about? You know?
Yeah. My favorite was when Boyle got advice from Gina to what he should do to ask her out. And he said, oh, take her to this movie festival. And so Boyle's like, hey, you want to go to this movie festival? Rosa says, yeah, okay. And what movie are we going to? And he said, well, I was, thinking about Citizen Kane. And she goes, Citizen Kane is a terrible movie. Why would anybody want to go to that? So she's like, pick a better movie. And then he comes back later and he's like, well, I just bought tickets to them all. Why would you buy tickets to them all? You can't just pick a movie. We're not going on this date. And that's kind of how they ended it.
Yeah.
I even liked the line after that. I was like, pick a better movie. It's like, I have to come up with a better movie than Citizen Kane.
Yeah, right.
That's a great joke. I love that. So, yep, there you go. So those are our categories. We had 6. What do you guys think? We had a bunch of different great pairings here. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Do you think Amy's more competent? Do you think Terry actually wouldn't be that much fun to hang out with? Let us know. We want to hear from you guys. Paul, if you're listening, we want you to text us. Let us know what you think.
Yeah. And, before we start talking about the show, he didn't make it into any of the pairings, but I really wanted to find an excuse to talk about Adrian Pimento, because as far as like a side character, he's one of my favorites. And Jason Mantzoukas is one of those actors who can be a lot and can really kind of be too much sometimes. But I think they used him just enough to make him hilarious whenever he showed up on screen.
Yeah, I was sick of him. I wanted him gone.
Yeah, well, he did leave. And I love when he was hiding in Nicolaj's closet, and Charles is like, "There's no monster in your closet."
I liked the gag that they had about when he lost his memory, and he also had like the tattoos and talking about like the movie Memento, and he's like, "What is that? What are you talking about?" It's like Finding Dory. Oh, Finding Dory! I love that movie. Like he knew the Pixar movie, but not like the actual thing that this was clearly done off of. Paul, did you ever see Memento?
No, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, it's a great movie. You should go see it. It's really, really good. I don't like noir films, but this is like the best neo-noir I think I've ever seen.
I haven't seen it either, but I have seen Finding Dory.
Oh my gosh, guys. Memento, it's Christopher Nolan. Everyone loves Christopher Nolan. He's great. All right, whatever. Fine. It's not even an auteur film. It's not even like one of these like, oh my gosh, he's seen this prestige film. No, it's
This is why I'm not your co-host for the Movies on a Monday, because I haven't seen
I don't watch a lot of movies, honestly.
Oh my gosh. I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. No, it's fine. If you do like great movies, listen to Movies on a Monday. I don't always toot my own horn on here, but when I do, it's about my other podcast.
Speaking of movies, without giving any spoilers away, I will say you guys are both dressed like cool youth pastors.
Are there such things as cool youth pastors? I thought they're all dorks.
They're trying to be cool youth pastors.
Yeah. So
maybe a hip youth pastor would be.
Was that the line?
I don't know if that was the line. I think it was something like I don't remember the exact line.
It's a line from a movie that I'm sure I knew Matt would get the reference. Yes. That just came out. Yes,
I do. All right. Well, hey, again, let us. Oh, trivia. That's what we're doing. We need to do trivia. Okay, so last week, if you guys listened to that episode, or if you didn't, the trivia is staying the same. Last week, we talked about a TV show from 1969, and then we kind of transitioned into another trivia about what TV show that is still making, or that the characters are still around today, debuted in 1969. And that was Scooby-Doo. 52 years old now. Yep. It's an old show.
And believe it or not, Paul, last week, Matt was the one who referenced the 1969 song from Even Stevens, the musical episode.
Wow. That is something.
Mm. It is. You're welcome. You're welcome, world. Disney. Get at it.
So I had a trivia from this week. We one of the big. We started that part. I had trivia for this week. One of the big things in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is the Halloween heist. And there were 8 seasons. And there's one season in season 5 where nobody officially won the heist because that's when Jake proposed to Amy. So the other 7 seasons, each had a different winner. So if you include Hitchcock and Scully, there are 9 main characters over the course of the show. Who are the only 2 main characters who never won a Halloween heist?
Pimento and Wedge.
Yep. Those are the main ones I'm talking about.
The ones that weren't included in that 9. Oh, Michael Scott and Leslie Knope. But the real
Hey,
answer is coming next week.
Yes.
Speaking of Michael Scott and Leslie Knope, can we just give Mike Schur a little bit of a pat on the back here for being like on the writing staff and the creator of like most of the shows you guys talk about on this podcast?
Yep.
We've given him so many pats in the back. I'm sure. I'm surprised it hasn't broken yet. Like we talk about Mike. I know Mike Schur more than any other showrunner or writer that we talk about. He gets brought up so much.
Yeah, because The Office, Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place. I think there's probably more.
Not to mention The OC.
He did The OC?
He was a writer on The OC.
So he's the reason Adam Brody had to leave Gilmore Girls.
Apparently.
He's the reason Adam Brody had a career. No, okay. I take it away from him now. I'm sorry, Mike Schur. You've got a notch now. -1. All right. Well, enough Adam Brody bashing. We, again, thank you so much, guys, for those who listened to us throughout 2021. Welcome to a brand new year. We're excited to have you with us. We're going to have some great episodes coming up. Next week, we're talking about Hawkeye. So if you haven't watched that show, go watch it. 6 episodes on Disney+. It's a great show. We'll talk about that next week. And until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Paul.
And I reminded you to stay tuned and keep watching.